Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. This will be excited to talk to a Facebook expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
Well, this will be fun. So first, tell folks what it is that you do at Facebook, and then we'll kind of hop into some really cool tools that Facebook has and how maybe those tools could help folks as they navigate, crazy things like weather disasters.
Yeah, well, I love talking about my job. I think I have one of the coolest jobs in the world. So I lead a team called AI for Good at Meta, and my job is to take all the tools that Meta creates from a technological perspective. That could be things like the Facebook app that everyone knows and loves, or tools like our open source AI models that I'll talk about today, and try and figure out how they can be used for social impact around the world. And so this can be for applications like public health, this can be used for applications like climate change. And today, the topic of conversation will be the issue of disaster, an area we've been in.
That's awesome, man. I bet that is a fun job. I bet you have a lot of fun, and I'm sure you do tons of these types of interviews. But today we get to kind of talk about how Facebook and AI can help prep somebody for disaster. Disasters, weather disasters happen all over the US. We just had one here in Alaska. Tell me about these tools that Facebook has and how the average person could maybe utilize them to help them prepare.
Sure. So before we dive into the topic of AI, which I think is really the future of how disaster response is going to work in the US and abroad, we have a lot of tools that are available on the Facebook app right now that have actually been in market for a number of years. I'll chat about three that I think are the most important for people to know about. One is called Safety Check. And this is a tool that if you're on Facebook and you're in a disaster affected area, you'll essentially get a notification to your Facebook account that allows you to mark yourself safe. We think this is an important tool because, during disasters, it's really hard to stay in touch with your broader community. Maybe you only stay in touch with a couple close family members. But this allows you to mark yourself safe and let your whole social network know that you're out of harm's way. The second tool is called local alerts. This is really more about you getting information from emergency response agencies in your area. And this is a tool that you can opt into getting notifications essentially from either your local police department or your local emergency management department. If they have a Facebook page and they use local alerts, you'll be able to get notifications directly from them as the situation unfolds on the ground. And we believe this is a really important tool that empowers local governments and first responders to directly communicate with affected communities. And the last but not least is that many people don't know, but Facebook also has a really robust set of fundraising tools that allow for individuals who are out of a disaster affected area to raise funds for those who are affected. Maybe they need supplies, maybe they need funding, maybe they need housing assistance. Fundraising is a really powerful tool in a way that you can support communities affected by disaster. And you can create a nonprofit fundraiser for everything from a local animal shelter to a Red Cross in your area. And we believe this is a really powerful tool for people to know about as well.
That's cool. So the check, the check mark safe is not just a meme. It's an actual thing. We've all seen the memes of like, I'm safe from whatever, funny thing was happening that week. But this is an actual thing where people could go in and mark themselves safe. Maybe they're in a hurricane or a tornado or a flood or something like that.
That's right.
And they could inform loved ones that I'm alive. And that's an easy way to do that. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
way it works?
that's exactly how it works. And I find it to be a really helpful tool. Sometimes things are happening in other countries. I'll have a friend from graduate school that's in a country where there was a horrible earthquake or a typhoon. It's always a relief when I open my Facebook account to see somebody who I know is in a disaster affected area. It doesn't require me reaching out to them directly, but if you see that they've marked themselves safe, they're okay. And that can be really a relief to their broader social network.
And this is probably something that if you can navigate Facebook, you could easily be able to do this part of it. It's not like you don't need like a degree in
No, not at all.
coding or developing, or if you're able to upload a Facebook photo, you could probably do this part.
Yeah, you'll get a notification essentially at the top of your news feed. It's essentially one click to mark yourself safe. And so we've tried to make it as easy as possible for people to do that.
And do people, I mean, I'm sure you have data on this, but my guess is people are using this pretty actively all over the globe when it comes to disasters.
Indeed. Billions of people over years have marked themselves safe. And we believe it's a really important tool. And we have kept it going. It's launched over a decade ago. And we believe.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about some of these new really cool AI tools and what they are and maybe what it means to being prepared for disasters?
Sure. So many people maybe don't realize, but in addition to all of the sort of social networking tools that Meta offers, we also are an AI company and we have open source AI tools. And I'll talk about a few of them today. One is called Llama, which is a large language model, similar to other models that power tools like ChatGPT. We also have what are called computer vision models. So these are AI models that work on imagery, namely things like photographs, images, video, and we've made a lot of these models open source, which means anyone can download them and use them free of charge. And so, in the context of disaster response, we have been working with partners around the United States and around the globe to figure out how artificial intelligence, whether or not it's large language models like Llama or computer vision models like Segment Anything, can essentially improve emergency response times, improve preparedness, create tools for first responders. And we're already seeing that happen in collaboration with nonprofits and research institutions across the states.
That's awesome. So if there's an agency, let's say in Alaska where I live, that wanted to utilize these tools, how would they go about utilizing these tools? Is it just simple sign up, or do they need to work with somebody on your team? What are some of those steps that people could take?
Sure. Starting with some of the more sort of on platform, consumer ready tools that we talked about at the very beginning. If you're a local response agency in Alaska and you're not yet enrolled in local alerts, there's a very straightforward process to do that. If you have a Facebook page, you can essentially see if your alerts right on the Facebook page. You can also Google the workflow very easily. But for things like our AI tools, there's a number of different ways you can have it. So if you have an engineering team or if you have a science team that's familiar with artificial intelligence, these are things you can download and use right out of the box. We have a website, ai.meta.com, and it has all of our open source models there. Tools like Llama actually have their own website, llama.com, again, which is our large language model. But then there's another way you could go about it, and that this is the way that we think is most productive, is we think that in partnership with your local research institution, you may already learn a lot. So when Meta releases these open source models, you'll find that the research community uses them sometimes the day that they're open sourced. And so sometimes if you have a local research institution or university that's doing research in disaster response, they have may already gotten their hands dirty with some of Meta's open source models, and we see very fruitful collaboration in that regard as well.
That's cool. So, what about from like a practical standpoint? How do these tools, the AI ones specifically, how do they help during, a hurricane or an earthquake? Let's say there is a institution that's using them in a proactive way to, help with disaster preparedness. What does that look like? Like, how are the tools actually
Sure.
practically helping the, average John and Joe out in the world?
Yeah. So when we think about artificial intelligence, the major thing people should be thinking is about making what were previously manual workflows much more automated and faster. And so, to give an example from the computer vision space, this is a space that I spend a lot of time working in. Again, this is AI that's focused on analyzing imagery and video. We have big issues across coastal communities in the United States, Alaska included, in terms of actually predicting flood zones. And so, normally, what you're going to have to do in order to predict if an area is going to flood is maybe you'll have some sort of automated monitoring. This could be some sort of camera sensor that's placed at the coastline. But in traditional workflows, what you'll have to do is hire somebody back at some headquarters to look at these photos coming in from the field and do a bunch of manual measurements and figure out, okay, the sort of coast starts here and the water seems to be moving at this rate, and we believe that the likelihood of flooding in the next week is X. And it's all hyper manual and requires a lot of people to do a lot of work. What you can do with the advent of artificial intelligence and a model like Segment Anything basically can cut out any object from an image. So in an automated fashion, it can say, this is where the coastline is, this is how quickly it's moving. And the calculations required become much faster to then the teams actually sending notifications for things like evacuation orders or other types of preparedness efforts that can happen essentially without that manual workflow needing to take place. And so we think there's already, again, been a bunch of research collaborations that will have used Segment Anything for coastal flood monitoring in an automated fashion. And we think what the next phase of emergency preparedness response was going to look like is essentially having those research collaborations be brought into emergency management workflows and being scaled up in a way that makes these evacuation orders and preparedness efforts work quickly.
That's great. So, lots of cities, probably almost every county or borough across the US, including here in Alaska, they have departments of emergency management. And has Facebook found success in working with these types of local emergency management entities? And is there training that comes along with it from Facebook side?
Sure. So we've done this in a lot of states. Generally speaking, again, I think it's a partnership model that spans teams like Meta, research institutions or nonprofits, and the public sector. So we tend to work actually as one big consortium of actors. So Meta will be the organization that supplies the open source AI model. Again, we make our many of our models available in a fashion that's completely free and available to anybody who wants to use them. And then what we often do, we'll partner with a local university. So to give an example of Texas, we've been working with Texas A&M for a number of years. They actually house a research institution called the Institute for Disaster Resilient Texas that was formed after Hurricane Harvey. They're the ones taking Meta's Llama model and building custom tooling for the Texas set of use cases and the emergency management set of use cases. And then they're the ones sharing that with the emergency management department in Harris County. So I've gone to Harris County and trained people.
Nice.
So I've gone to California and trained people on our tools. We just actually did a disaster response workshop in Philadelphia that was really more a preparedness effort in anticipation of the 2026 World Cup game. So certainly work hand in hand with local government, but we also try to bring our local partners who can really provide that sustainability plan to be able to use our tools locally for their own individual use cases over the long term.
Nice. And with most of this being open source, there is not a huge cost there to the borough, to the emergency management side. But oftentimes that is a stumbling block for government agencies or nonprofits. Even if something's open source, it's tough to get a position funded or whatever it is. Does Meta or Facebook do any sort of grants to help kind of spur this work forward in a county or a city or borough?
Sure. We have a program called the Llama Impact Grants Program that looks at sort of seed funding for exactly these kind of use cases. So we funded quite a number of social impact ventures around the world, essentially trying to ensure their AI models are used in this regard. So we do have those sort of grant programs in place. But again, I also think that what's neat about partnering, not just directly with the public sector, is it's really neat to see the way research institutions can sometimes also tap into things like private philanthropy if they want to use Meta's open source models in an emergency management capacity or in another social impact capacity. There's often additional funding opportunities for those projects as well.
Nice. So, this is your world. You get to meet folks all over the US, probably over the globe. Do you have a moment in your job in this capacity where you've kind of looked back and said, man, we're actually making a difference here? Tell me about what that looked like for you.
I think the peak of that was actually probably during the COVID pandemic. So a different set of use cases, not in sort of disaster response and extreme weather, but in this case, public health emergencies. So as you might imagine, before the onset of things like the COVID vaccine, we were being told that there were two things that we could do to keep ourselves safe. One was to stay home, and the other was to wear masks. And I don't know if you're familiar with most doctors' offices or public health surveillance systems, but they tend to not have data on what percentage of the population is wearing masks or staying home. These are not things we've historically had to measure as part of a global pandemic. And so the early version of my program actually focused much more on open data, and we partnered with, I would say, every country I could name at the time to share open source mobility data so that people could at scale track whether or not populations were adhering to stay at home orders. Uh, Facebook also did something which was incredibly impressive, is that we also launched a global survey in 200 countries in 55 languages every single day for almost 2 years to try to better understand at scale whether or not people were wearing masks and other sort of preventive measures relevant to the COVID pandemic. And those tools actually became the go-to data sources for international forecasting institutions around the world, research institutions around the world. There really wasn't any other data from traditional sources that they could rely on. So I think what global emergencies tell us is that, when we break down these institutional barriers, we really just try to solve problems together, we can get incredible work done. And it's a period of my career I'm very proud of and look back on. It was obviously horrible that we were
Yeah.
facing COVID at the time. in terms of the level of collaboration and just cooperation that took place across public, private, and nonprofit sectors, it was pretty exceptional in that regard.
Nice. Well, my last question to you is this, Laura, is what's the maybe end goal or big success look like specifically with the AI disaster preparedness tools that Meta has? Let's say it's 5 years from now. What do you consider is going to be the big win for you all looking back and saying, okay, we're doing something good here. We're headed in the right direction. And, your team can sit back and say, that's a big W. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would hope to be able to get ahead of things as much as is possible, and this is really challenging. So I think for rural communities, it's gonna be how we work together with both online and offline solutions. So if you think about a workflow that involves artificial intelligence, how can something like a flood siren that maybe has to work in an offline fashion still sort of get the right notification and the right time to go off so that communities can, remove themselves from harm's way? I mean, I work on a global program too, so I think a lot about I would love to be able to see what we can achieve in, an urban setting in New York City or in California. I would want us to be able to achieve that not only in rural settings in the United States, but around the world. And I think that's going to be something we really have to partner with the research community on. And then also to really think about how we get these solutions out of the very technical communities and sometimes in which they're created and into the hands of people on the ground. So at the end of the day, it's about, saving more lives from things like
Yeah.
weather and natural disasters. And I think it's a tall order to get there for sure.
Well, this has been exciting, folks. I'll put the links to those new AI tools in the podcast description. Laura, I want to thank you. I appreciate you joining us here on the show. Do you have any last minute thoughts here before we head off? The floor is yours.
Oh, well, I just thank you for having me, Jonathan. Happy Thanksgiving and wishing everybody a safe and happy holiday season.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. You're welcome back anytime.